Okay, Matthew chapter 1, and you guys say, uh-huh. If you don't have a Bible, we have a cheater Bible on the screen, and it'll help you. Or there's a million different apps you can download, and you can check it out. So Matthew chapter 1, we're going to start at verse number 18. It says this, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly." By the way, this is like the original Maury Povich story right here. Like if you're actually reading into like the words, it's like this is like a scandalous situation from the outside, the way it looks. "But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, 'Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.' All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. 'Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel,'" which means God with us. I don't have a lot of scary dreams. I really don't. Most of the time I don't remember dreaming. I don't remember, frankly, falling asleep most of the time. We have a 3-year-old, so it's like anytime you can just close your eyes and it's peaceful, it's beautiful. And a couple weeks, or maybe it was a couple months ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had a scary dream. And our house was getting robbed in my dream. And so I was like, oh man, I do what most men in this place would probably do, or maybe some of the strong, confident ladies, or maybe even, maybe that's your job and your husband doesn't do that. But anyways, I went around and I checked all the doors and all the windows in our house. Because it just makes you feel better, right? You wake up, you're like, what was that? I didn't know it was a scary dream. Maybe it was the Lord speaking to me in a dream. So I go and I start checking all the doors. It's like 3:30 in the morning. I'm not really fully coherent, but I did, for some reason, I grabbed my phone. I took my phone with me. It's like the 21st century. We don't go anywhere without our phones. And we're like, oh my gosh, I just woke up from a scary dream. Let me take my phone, So I'm taking my phone through my house, and I'm checking all the doors and everything. And you guys, I kid you not, I go into our laundry room, which the laundry room has a window that faces kind of a main street in our neighborhood. And I'm looking out, and I don't know why I happen to look out the window, but this truck just pulls up on our side street. Right as I'm looking out, I'm like, wow, it's weird. It's like middle of the night. And then two men get out of this truck, and they've got hoods on. And they just look like they're up to no good. And so, anytime you pull up to my house at 3:30 in the morning with hood on, I just had a scary dream, so everything already is all jacked up in my mind right now. My heart's already racing. And so, and then I wake up, so I see these guys, and they get out of the truck. They got hoods on, they're kind of looking around, not normal looking around, this is looking around, and this is looking around, you're up to no good. You know what I mean? Once you kind of lean in and you're kind of looking over your hood, something's not right. So they're not just looking around selling beef jerky door to door. These guys are they're just kind of trying to see what the scene is. And then they start making their way towards my side gate. And this is when I'm okay, let's go. This is game time, okay? I watched Taken 2. I apologize, but I watched it, okay? And so Liam Neeson that came out, and I did what any normal person would do. I was looking around for a weapon. Now, normally someone would ask me at the first service, man, why didn't you grab a golf club? Because I was I don't keep a golf club in my laundry room. I keep a golf club in my bedroom, okay, next to my bed, just in case someone comes in. They meet Mr. 9-iron, okay? Some people got 9mm, we have 9-iron, okay? And so I couldn't find a weapon, so I grabbed a hanger. And because one time my sister hit me in the lip with a hanger, and it hurt really bad. So I thought, if these guys come in, I could hide around the corner and just whack, and they'd be like, it's not a good house. Let's go to a different house. It's 3:30 in the morning, give me his grace. And then with my other hand, because I have my phone on me, I closed the Facebook app, and then, because it was hey, what's going on at 3:30 in the morning? And I closed the Facebook app, and I called 911. I'm like, officer, and because I had to give him a 20-minute head start, I was like, officer, there's 2 men with hoods on, and they're coming towards the side of my house. right now. You guys better get here. My heart is racing. Like my hands are kind of shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was like a bad tremble shake or like, let's do this tremble shake. But I had my hanger, and so I'm ready to go. And the guys start coming, and they start coming towards our side gate. And I'm like, oh man, okay, it's game time. Let's do this. And I'm like pumping myself up. But actually, I was hiding in the shadows because I didn't want them to see me. And when I was on my phone, I held it really close to my face because I didn't want them to see the light. And then they'd see my face and like, oh, he's just got a hanger. And then the other guy would be like, no, man, I got hit with a hanger once. It hurts really bad. And then they would still maybe go to a different house. But here's the best part, is the guys didn't even come like towards my house. They started walking on the sidewalk, and then they were like taking care of my recycling or something. So I had to call 911 back. And I was like, yeah, hey, it's me again. I know you guys are like really busy down there taking care of like way more important things. But those two guys, they are not, in fact, breaking into my house right now. I think they took like a milk carton. But anyways, I apologize for saying, yeah, you could take that other call. Okay, all right, bye. And then I hung up, and then I went back to my bed, and my wife's like, is everything okay? I'm like, everything's great. Everything's great. She's like, why are you still clenching a hanger? I'm like, I was doing laundry. And the funny thing is, in our relationship with God, we can have this kind of filter of fear. That anytime God shows up, we're afraid. Have you ever been at a party and someone kind of makes like a religious joke, and then someone's like, let me take a couple steps away. I don't want lightning to strike. You know what I'm talking about, where like it's like the religious person in the group, or someone, when you're walking into a church, what do? You kind of like button up all the way, make sure everything's covered, and you kind of like walk like a robot, because you have to make sure that, once you cross those doors, this carpet's different than the carpet across the street. I'll tell you that right now. This carpet is actually, no, it's like probably from the same manufacturer. But we come in and we have this kind of glaze that if I don't do something right, lightning from heaven could come and strike me at any time. Now, the Bible certainly talks about a deep honor and a deep respect for the holiness of God. There is that, unequivocally, this deep honor and deep respect for God, for who he is, for his person. But then somehow we've taken that and we've pushed it into this emotion of fear. And so now, in our relationship with God, when we come to God, for many of us, the primary emotion in our connection with God is to be afraid. We're afraid to go to church. We're afraid to be real in a connect group. We're afraid to say a prayer request. We're afraid to get involved. We're afraid, because if anyone were to find out that who we really were or who we really are, we wouldn't be accepted. We'd be struck down by lightning. We'd be hit by a bus, whatever, fill in the blanks. Something terrible will happen because we're not like those really good people. In two different Gospels, Matthew and Luke, they record the birth of Jesus. And between those two Gospels, because John starts out with kind of like this theological discussion, and Mark starts out with the miracles of Jesus, but Matthew and Luke Matthew talks about the lineage of Jesus and then the birth of Jesus, and Luke talks about how Jesus, what was going on in the world during that time. And between those two Gospels, Matthew and Luke, 4 different times, we have angels appearing to some of the main characters of the Christmas story. And 4 times they say, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. They come to Joseph, the father of Jesus, and they say, Joseph, do not be afraid. They come to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and they say, Mary, blessed, highly favored one, do not be afraid. They come to Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, the forerunner, kind of like the pre-show for Jesus. And they come to him, and he's in his old age, and he's part of the priestly system. And the angel says to him, Zechariah, do not be afraid. And a 4th time, shepherds in a field watching their sheep. a whole host of heaven shows up and they say, do not be afraid. 4 times we hear, do not be afraid. Do you know that the number 4 in the Bible often represents the times and seasons of God? Kind of the appointed times of God. There's 4 seasons in most cities. LA, we kind of have like 1.5. We have like summer, and then we kind of have like a hold on a minute, and then we go back to summer. You know what I'm talking about? It's like AC, 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 and then we turn on our heaters for some reason. We're like, oh my gosh, it's so cold. It's like 68 degrees. And other communities, like in Oregon, 68 degrees, they're outside in like swimsuits. The guys are like trying to get their white chest tan to turn to like a darker shade of white. And for us, it's like so everywhere else they have these things called seasons, 4 seasons. And it's like God is saying, for every season of life, we have a do not be afraid. We have a do not be afraid for our springtime. We have a do not be afraid for our summertime. We have a do not be afraid for our fall. And we have a do not be afraid for our winter. No matter what season you may find yourself in, there is a do not be afraid. Fear and being afraid is no longer our primary emotion in our relationship with God. Deep respect and honor, yes, but being afraid, no. We look at the life of Jesus. We look at who he connects with. We look at the way he relates with people. People deeply respect him. People deeply love him. People deeply worship him, but you never see people cowering at his feet as if he's going to strike them down with lightning. Anytime anyone's cowering, Jesus is the one who lifts them up. And so for whatever season you may find yourself in, maybe you're going through relationship struggles. Maybe you're in the middle of a divorce. Maybe you just got let go. I just heard some news this morning of someone who they had just lost a child, 18 weeks into pregnancy. No matter what season you're going through, God's answer to you is do not be afraid. Through the good times, through the regular times, and through the hard times, you have and I have a do not be afraid. Emmanuel, God with us, means to you and to me, I don't have to be afraid anymore. I don't have to be afraid of my future, what's ahead. I don't have to be afraid of my past, what I've done. And I don't have to be afraid of what's going on in my world right now, because God is in control of it all. Do not be afraid. Emmanuel, God with us, means that you and I do not have to be afraid. And because we're not afraid, it also means a couple other things. It means that you and I can have an unrealistic, not realistic, but an unrealistic confidence in what's ahead. You know what a realistic confidence is? Oprah. Everything she does is awesome. Like I get the chai tea latte and they want to sell me the Oprah chai now. I'm like, what's the difference? They're like, this much cinnamon? and Howard Schultz and all the guys are sitting around a table. They're like, all right, guys, we want to sell more chai this season. And I'm like, yes, it tastes like pumpkin pie, which I love. And they're like, hey, how can we sell more? And they're like, let's put Oprah's signature on it. Hey, Oprah, can we send you lots of money to put your signature on our chais? And they're like, yes. And then so she puts her thumbprint on it, and it's amazing. You have Dr. Soon here in LA, everything amazing. Kobe, I went to the last game of last season. They were not gonna make the playoffs. They were out of it. No, like the place is packed. The place is packed. Jordan, LeBron. I mean, there's certain people that they have a realistic expectation that, hey, if they do something, that's great. But then there's like the rest of us, and we're not so sure of ourselves. We don't have like a golden thumbprint. Like if I put my signature on a drink, someone will be like, what's this? What is this? Who's Woosley? I said Wesley and he heard me wrong, and Woosley latte, that sounds terrible. Hey, who wants a Woosley latte? Hey guys, Woosley, it's one Oprah chai, please. But you and I, we have an unrealistic confidence now. Because we don't have to be afraid, and now heaven is not our enemy. Heaven is behind us like those shepherds saying, hey, this is really good news. Guys, this is really good news. The thing that God's put in your heart to do, you can do it. Unrealistic confidence. You ever seen a guy who just, like maybe just a regular average dude, approach someone, like maybe approach a female who is like way above average, and you're just kind of on the sideline watching it, and it's like a car is gonna like run a red light and hit another car, and you're like, no, go for it, but you're not really like telling them to go for it. You're just like, you're waiting for it to happen. Just like, oh, this is gonna be, I can't wait to talk to her afterwards to hear about this conversation. It'll be so funny. But a guy will go, if a guy has enough friends behind him, tell him, dude, do it. Man, you got this. Guys will do the dumbest things. I mean, I've been with friends and they're like taking a backflip. It's called a gainer. They would run and do a backflip off a roof into a pool. And it wasn't like straight down. There was like an 8-foot gap. So it's like, hey, like sudden death, or all your boys are with you, man. All your boys. And they're back here and they're like, dude, do it, bro. Do it. And like, what are you gonna get? And what do guys give each other? Dude, I'll give you props, bro. I'll give you so much props. That means nothing. And if a fella ever tries to explain this to like his lady afterwards, like, why did you do that? They were gonna give me props. She's like, props? What props? I'd rather have a woozly chai than props. But now you and I, we've got all of heaven standing behind us, saying, hey, that thing that God's put in your heart to do, it can actually be done. Have you ever been in that moment of worship and God speaks something to your heart and he's like, hey, this can happen. You can lead. You could do something great. You can start that business. You can forgive that person. You can move on from this. You can be successfully married. You can have great relationships and great friendships. You can be open. You can lead a group. That song that God's put in your heart, it can be written, it can be sung, you can be amazing. And we hear that, and they were like, oh man, I'm just like the normal, I don't have like the Oprah thumbprint. I don't have the Kobe or the LeBron. I don't have that going for me. I'm just a normal person. And we forget that all of heaven is standing behind us saying, you got this. You can do this. I'm with you. It's good news. You're gonna make it. You and I, we can have an unrealistic confidence because God is with us. And also you and I, we can approach God just as we are because God is with us. I remember being, when I was younger, we went to, actually went to 2 different kinds of churches. For a while we went to Episcopalian church, which is kind of like Catholic Light. And we went to, it's kind of like Catholic and then one shade over. We went to that kind of a church. And then a couple years later, we went to kind of like the way other side, and we went to a church that lasted like 3.5 hours long, prayer meetings just for days, and the preacher sweat like a lot, and we sat on metal folding chairs. So if I'm describing these 2 settings, it was great. But in all of them, I think that there was a certain amount of, man, I think if I come to God, I remember everyone was always dressed up. And I remember going to get my first suit so I can come to church dressed up in a suit. It was in I think I was like in the 4th grade. And there's nothing wrong with suits, by the way. I'm wearing one, kind of. But I remember thinking as a young child, like, I had to be a certain way. And if you and I are careful, we can take our deep honor and respect for God and for His holiness and turn it into this weird thing that He never intended it to be. We can turn it into this thing of, if you don't look a certain way, if you don't act a certain way, you don't get in. And we forget that none of us got in that way. We forget that the shepherds in this story of Emmanuel, God with us, we forget that the shepherds were the most irreligious people of their day. That they were people who didn't go to a church. They didn't go to synagogue on the weekends a lot of times because they're feeding the sheep. They didn't do the ritual washings because there's limited water supply in the desert. And so they would use their water to drink and they would use their water to feed their animals, but they wouldn't do the ritual washings and they wouldn't bathe as much as required. And they often smelled more like sheep than they did like a synagogue. And these are the ones that the angels of heaven show up to and they say, this is really good news. This is really good news. God is here with you. In Matthew, he says this. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. They shall call his name Emmanuel. Quoting from Isaiah chapter 7 and verse number 14, except for Matthew does one small change. In Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah talks about the son will be born and we will call his name Emmanuel. We will call his name Emmanuel. And Matthew, quoting Isaiah, and there's many different, commentators believe many different things. In the expositor's commentary, Frank Gabeline, he gives like multiple examples of what this could be. And one of them meaning is this, is that it used to be we. A small circle. A small group. Chosen few. And now the doors have been opened. And they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is God with us. It's not just we. It's not just a few religious people, but they will call his name Emmanuel. You know, we have a Christmas Eve service coming up. We have on the 20th, and then we have two on Christmas Eve. I'll be at all of them. I love Christmas Eve services. But sometimes people who would never come on a normal Sunday will come to one of those nights because it feels a little bit more acceptable. And if you're a believer in this place, if you're a follower of Christ in this place, one of our jobs is to let people know that Jesus is not just for a we. It's not just for a small select few, but that Jesus is for all. It's Emmanuel, God with us. And they will call his name Emmanuel. They, the person that doesn't feel like they belong in church, the person that feels like they've done too much, the person that feels like their past is a weight that's too heavy to carry, the person that believes that their business is it's too crazy, things do not allow for me to be a part of this, the woman who's had too many divorces, the man who's had too many relationships, they will call his name Emmanuel. Not just a religious few, but they, Los Angeles, will call his name Emmanuel. From the west side to the east side. From Culver City, Beverly Hills, the San Fernando Valley, even as far as Burbank. It's deep. Glendale and Pasadena, Calabasas will call his name Emmanuel. Koreatown will call his name Emmanuel. South Central will call his name Emmanuel. Compton will call his name Emmanuel. It is not a race thing. It is not an age thing. It is not a demographic thing. It is a human thing. they will call his name Emmanuel. Emmanuel changes everything. Emmanuel means that you and I, we don't have to live in fear. It means we can have this unreasonable confidence that God is with us. It's more than just 10 of your friends, it's all of heaven. And Emmanuel means you can come as you are. God changes people from the inside out. I don't know how it works. Sometimes I get frustrated with myself, sometimes I get frustrated with others, and then you just give people a little bit of time and you realize that Emmanuel, God with us, God comes to the inside and he changes people, and you see him a couple months later and you see him like this old person, but they're a new person because Emmanuel, God with us. Emmanuel changes everything.